Every soul is a candle. Good evening. Hello, everybody. Who listens now, who listens later, who doesn't listen at all, either way, who talks. Welcome to Creative Spirituality. This is Phillip Namanworth, and if you'd like, if you can, put your pictures on, because it's easier for me to talk to people than to symbols. But we're back again for another class. We're in the beginning of the book of Bereshit. Hello, Jennifer, and David, and Brian. Someone please make sure that Uncle Stephen knows. And it's very interesting. Abraham gets two complete parshas to talk about all different parts of his life. Jacob gets a bunch later, and Isaac gets one. And in both Lech Lecha, the chapter last week, when God tells him to leave his home and go on this journey, there's a repetition this week in the Parsha, after it says Vayeira, that God appeared to him, and we have to discuss what that means. So in both chapters, let's see what happens. In both chapters, he has a revelation. In both, his wife Sarah is abducted by a Gentile king. In both chapters, he has a son, and Hagar enters into trees. In both chapters, his righteous behavior is contrasted with the immoral behavior of his nephew Lot. In both chapters, he defends the cities in the plain in Lech Lecha against the kings, and in Vayeira, he fights with God about the divine destruction. It's as if Abraham had to repeat everything he experienced in his first Parsha, or his first life, if you want to call it that, and go into a new level in order to infuse his past accomplishments with a new level of divine consciousness. So it's kind of a interesting thing, because I know Jennifer in the old days would say, well, didn't he do that last week? They stole his wife. And one, at the end of the last week's Parsha, he finally, he is instructed to circumcise himself.
And I think that's the big difference between the two parshas.
Yes, it's absolutely the big difference. Hello, Stephen. I'm going to ask everybody sort of to mute, because when it plays back for general public, you know, people should have their privacy, and nobody needs to see you eating dinner unless you really would like that. So, it's a repetition. It's sort of like saying, I did this in the past, but I didn't understand. Now I'm going to do it again, the same thing, but with more of an understanding. I tolerated my daughter's behavior, but I was crazy at the time. Now I'm going to tell her how much I love her, or whatever it is. So it's an interesting thing. It says in the Talmud in a couple of places that the forefathers did all of the mitzvahs before they were given. However, we can't postskin from that. You can't say that we have this law because God told Abraham to circumcise himself. That's why we do it. We refer to it, but we do it because it was given on Mount Sinai. So, but you can learn a lot from their character, and we do always represent when there's a bris, we refer to Abraham because of his attitude that got him to that place. Now, if he knew all the mitzvahs, why did he wait for God to tell him? So that's a good question, because he was already, separating maybe milk and meat, and treating people a certain way, and dealing with people in a Torah way. But he knew, of course, that this is not one of those mitzvahs you can do again. Once you're circumcised, if you do it correctly. So he waited for Hashem, and Hashem, because of the work he did on himself, he gave it as a commandment. We grow up in a culture here and around the world in many places where cultures dictate that doing something because you want to is the most valuable thing, and doing it because you're commanded is not quite as valuable. However, as Jews, it's just the opposite. It's okay to feel like you want to do it, but being able to connect to the commander of the mitzvah is the ideal. The ideal is to work so much on yourself that you get to the source of your soul. And that's why when Brian before was asking, what does Vayeira mean? God appeared to him. He couldn't reach that level until he was circumcised. But look what he did on his own. In the Midrashim, it tells all these stories about he discovered God at 3 years old. He was thrown into a furnace. He was tried to be killed by this one and that one. And then when God says to him, Lech lecha, leave your home and go out, he's 75 years old already. So maybe the question could be, the Torah is not a history book, but why does it start later when he's ready to hear God's voice? Because the actual benefit of things is not what you always, it is that you have certain inclinations and do them, but that's not the tachlis, that's not the goal. The goal is that you connect with yourself on such a high level that you can relate to your own soul and develop and have an awareness of something greater. And through that awareness, since the soul is created to heaven above, to God, have an experience of drawing down energy from that level. It's not sort of just like an appearance they have in certain mystical traditions that someone saw a sign. It's not like that. I've had this experience in my own life when I was a student for Rabbi Jacobson for 16 years, and I was running his classes, and he asked me to teach his class, which changed my life incredibly. I wouldn't be here today if he hadn't done that. And after that, I taught it a number of times because I had been teaching on my own and studying on my own. And then later, one class after that, soon after that, in my own classes that I've been given, this is the 38th year of classes, someone said to me, something changed about you. And I said, what? I said, it's much deeper. So I would assume, and as I did then, that I was open to a deeper level of understanding because there was much stuff I learned and much stuff we all learn that we can't really repeat as ours. You can sort of understand it. You can understand the teacher's position. You can understand the philosophers, the cultures, the artists, but it's hard to express from your own essence until you get it on a certain level. And that's a gift. But it's a gift that comes from a lot of effort. That's why in the holidays, it says Shavuos says 50 days after Pesach. Well, you have to do on your own. You have to be counting the 49 days to reach a level where you could receive that energy. If a person is constantly absorbed in their ego and different values that stand in the way, and the only way to know this is to try it out, then you actually block energy. So Jewish thought and Yiddishkeit is not meant to tell you something or teach you something you don't know. It's to peel away the layers to remind you of what you do know and who you are already. It's like a little bit like saying, aha, I had an aha moment. I always thought that. Someone once wrote me a very nice note about one of my songs. Said, just love these things. I've thought those things a million times and couldn't say them. Well, with work, they'll say them in their way, but the idea is the same. There are people who write love songs all the time, and people are attracted to them. But the ones that stick in our minds are the ones that bring up a new perception. Think of a song called My Funny Valentine. It's about how a woman is so comic, and yet it's one of the greatest love songs ever written because of the idea of how personal that expression of caring for people is. It's not based on your shopping list. And the Torah is there to remind you who you are. In answer to one of Brian's questions, which I always ask, which candle are you? The more you know about yourself, the more you know what you expect or how you act or what you would like from others, because we like things that are in line with who we are and how we operate. At some point, we learn to understand that a person with opposite feelings and stuff it can be a better match. A person with different, if people are close and they have different ideas, it explodes both people, so they grow in a different direction. Today, we live in a culture where that is poo-pooed, and we seem to be living in a culture of group think, where if you don't agree with the major cultural, philosophical, and theological, pronouncements, you're out of the game. It's completely not freedom. It's completely what happens in socialist and communist countries. And it's very subtle because it can feel like it has. And someone said to my wife today, they follow a certain person. She said, "Oh, isn't their opinion interesting? Isn't it fascinating?" Well, as Rashi says, when he was talking about the spies coming back, he says, every falsehood has a little bit of truth in it to grab you. So yes, isn't it better that certain people don't suffer? Right. But what are the rest of the things? Are they coming to kill you? Or I'm not. Maybe that's not a good example, or because God should erase all suffering from the world. But what is the? Not every situation is the same. It says, "Thou shalt not kill," but it doesn't say, "Thou shalt not defend yourself." So you have to be able to have critical thinking. Critical thinking means you can understand what's happening in the moment and its repercussions after. It says the wise person thinks with their brain. In other words, if there's time, I'm not talking about sudden events that need a response, like walking in the street or things like that. If I have a situation, if I do this, what are the repercussions? First of all, usually when we have a problem or something, there's an emotional configuration that goes with it. It could be anger, it could be loss, it could be happiness. So first we want to relate on that emotional level. But if you take the second to think, you might say yes, that's the right thing, but now's not the right time. That's what they say, the space in the letter hey. As we know, we've said this a million times. It's got 3 lines left. It's actually more like this on the thing, backwards. the top line is thought, the right line is speech, and the left line is action. There's a space there. How many of our lives could be a lot different if we would just take a second? Because thought could lead you into an emotional state. Oh, that person is trying to do something to me or whatever. To you straighten it out and understand it's a little better. So if you have a second to think things over, you can have a greater palate. In other words, you don't always have to respond to your own emotional state, which varies from day to day in the same way. Excuse me, I'm going to take some water. Which is a game changer and a game saver, especially for those of us who have, people in our lives, relatives, friends, lovers, parents, children, especially. Sometimes you see that certain things always get you into a a situation with your children that's not comfortable, but the same patterns happen over again because things do repeat themselves. So if we look at Abraham's example, he kind of relives them on a higher level and infuses them with a different quality. Maybe the next time you have a little static with someone and you answer with a little more consideration or a different perspective, it changes the ball game. Can't always be, I'm going to say this and you're going to say that. As we've discussed here, mathematically, A plus B equals C. And if you're A or B, you can change the C, even if the other person doesn't. But just the knowledge that you can change is a whole change. Because most of us feel like this is the way I am, this is how I've been, this is how I was born, this is the way the economy works, blah, 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 blah. I can't change anything, which is not true. Because you never step into the same river twice anyway, the philosophers used to say, right? Everything is different in every moment. And even if you have to respond in a similar manner, it could be with a different attitude. Could be saying, okay, I need to do that right now, but I don't have to take that home with me. I don't have to be mad about it. It's just the way it is right now or whatever. You have many choices. One of the ways we learn about our choices is by Aseh Rav and Kane Haver. Get yourself a Rav, someone, a mentor, who you can discuss very deep issues with, because we all in our life have things that are important, especially as we get older. We could see it with we all have to go to doctors. You don't go to the dentist if you have, a broken bone. You find the right surgeon or doctor and you go to that doctor. And yet, emotionally, we'll talk to friends or people who don't know anything about deep emotional things when it's better to understand which friends understand you, which friends have some wisdom, what you don't know about yourself, where you always get into trouble. Just having this kind of a little bit of self-knowledge doesn't mean we're not going to slip back and forth into different behaviors that we've always done, but how long you stay there and how quickly you get out of them or apologize quickly or say, I'll call you back, or you have so many choices. We have this person, Abraham. First of all, his name is Avram. That was his first name, which means exalted father, which actually means an intellect that is so superior, it knows so much it can't even tell you about it. Then Hashem adds the letter Hey to his name, which gives him the ability to go even deeper so he can explain the depth of what he understands about reality and godliness and holiness and life to anyone because he's got that letter Hey, which helps him channel it. It changes his life because now it says the converts that he and Sarah made, he's able to talk to anybody on any level, which would be nice in our society where people, if they find out you voted for the person, that's the end of any conversation you'll ever have with them in life. Such a narrow life. Now he goes out on his own. He leaves his home. He does exactly what Hashem says, and he circumcises himself. And then it says, Vayeira Elov. God appeared to him, and the commentators ask, it says, why don't they use his name, Vayeira Avraham? I mean, we know he's talking to, but he's so important. Why don't they just say they appeared to him? It's a very good question. You could answer it and say, well, we know who he's talking to about. He's just been talking about him. That's one level. But in many cases, that doesn't happen. We know he's talking about it. Mentions Moshe a million times. Doesn't say him. So a very interesting comment from Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev. He says, at the time that Abraham circumcised himself at 99, if you want to picture that, close your eyes, and if you can do it, you're a better person than I am. He's 99. He circumcised himself. He's been through all of these changes. And he takes the one mitzvah that is in one's body forever. And he does it, and he circumcises his household, including Ishmael at the age of 14. And his self negligence, it's called Mesiras Nefesh, his depth of humility is so deep that his name doesn't even apply to him. He's on a higher level. God appears to him on the level that God appears to you. You don't need a name. You're using the energy of what you're in direct proportion to. So that's such an interesting fact. In other words, it's this letting go of who you are, the more you understand, and you understand that the name is merely a way that you use to connect to the universe and to talk to people and to be a channel for the goodness and kindness and talent that God has given you, because you got to have a way of doing it. Can't go through life with people not understanding each other. Though I'm sure if anybody's like me, I had many teachers in college. They were brilliant, but I never understood a word they said. I tell you, I never understood it, I never got it, and I never learned anything. But I knew they were brilliant. They were saying amazing things, but they couldn't. And then I had a philosophy teacher who could actually make you understand something. This is a whole deeper level. To be able to explain something to someone else. It says that King Solomon had 3,000 parables for everything. It means he could talk to anybody on the lower level, whatever level, he could find a way to communicate with them. Why? Because he understood the essence of what he was saying and who he was, and with great depth. And that takes a certain amount of humility and getting out of your own way. But to get out of one's own way, one has to study, one has to do some work. Sure, there are people who are born smart. There are people who are born spiritual oriented. There's people who do everything. But when you put in the work of constantly being in touch by studying and by praying and by doing Torah and mitzvahs, you draw down light from a heavenly source into the daily life. This is an extraordinary ability that a human being has. Why should I give it up and say, I don't want to do two mitzvahs? Well, we don't know what they are. They changed the whole world. Hashem's mitzvahs mostly involve normal things, taking money and giving charity. For men, putting on tefillin and talis. For women, nida and baking challah and lighting candles. It's not you have to go out and recreate the world. It's things that are objects that are in your life. Going to visit a sick person. But these acts, because we do them because we are commanded, and remember the word command, tzavtzar, actually means to connect. We're connecting to our soul, which is connected to heaven. It draws light into that particular object, so that object is now holy. And this is where we make a home for God in this world. It's not like I have to go around wearing payas and, for men, we have payas, and we just don't shave this area. You live your life. You have to have children, try to and help be with friends and help and be part of the society. But how you do it is different. And Vayeira, God appears to Abraham, and now he's going to go through some very, very difficult stuff. Now, if you remember, and if you've been following, this is a great time to follow the Torah through this book, because you learn who the people who our ancestors are and our progenitors, and why there needed to be a Jewish people. We learned that God created everybody in a divine image because it was meant for all people, and then people chose not to follow it. So Abraham came along, and he was someone who was ready to do this and teach his family and suffer for it and be humble for it and dedicated for it. So he became the one for that particular job in the universe, and we are his descendants. Whether we know a lot or know a little, we're all connected on that level. And Sarah as well. Sarah is, in fact, on a higher level, because when there's a discussion between Sarah and Abraham, God says, listen to your wife. She's on a higher level. What does that mean? It means actually not higher in the sense that we think. God tells him, if Sarah's upset, send away Isaac. Send away Ishmael and his mother. Sorry. And Abraham, who's the pure chesed, who only understands about giving, it's like having too much empathy, wants to keep giving. No, if only Ishmael would live before you. But Sarah, who's more involved in the home and the life and the world, sees the impact of that and says, nah, that's no good. You're really floating above the spheres now, a little bit. He was on such a high level, she was able to bring it down into a level that it could be used in the universe on a certain level. And isn't that sort of what we'd all like, for people to understand the depth of how we feel, either about them or about God or about living together as one people, and being able to express that rather than just having people saying, first I have to explain what chesed is. Chesed is pure giving and love, but if it has only that, it doesn't have a balance, it means negativity can draw on the energy of that chesed. And all it wants to do is give, whether you want it or not, whether you can bear it or not. And this is what Ishmael was. He was called the Klipa of Chesed. He will give you what you need, whether you want it or not, even if he has to chop your head off to do it. This is why when Isaac was born, he had a different personality. He looked like Abraham. It says he gave birth to someone in his old age, but those words also say who looked like him. In fact, in the Midrashim, in the center of Rena, it says people couldn't tell them apart. So Hashem had to make Abraham age so they'd know the difference between who is who. Isaac was a little more strict. He had a little more mind. He knew when to stop. He knew how to use firmness in a positive way, which is a form of kindness. When you tell a child, no, you have to go and do this for yourself as a form of kindness, not a form of cruelty, or you have to take this medicine, just even if you have to scream, you're sick, you have to take the medicine, this is a form of kindness. And Sarah saw that, and Yitzhak did that with the people that he came in contact with. In fact, but as Abraham would teach everybody, Isaac would teach people only if they came and they did a little study. That's what it says. So now you have these two spiritual facets. This is part of the history of who we are. We all have that desire to give. And then sometimes we wonder, well, if I say no, am I being bad? Shouldn't I say yes to everything? I had a friend always say, I say yes to everybody, and not everybody wants to help me. Well, not everything is the same. One has to know how much time to spend with themselves, how much time to spend with family, how much time to spend with work, how much time to spend on their own. And it's not always easy, and this is why we try to learn to do it with mentors and things. And when you work it out until you get it right. It's a little bit like the distance in the spark plug. If it's not working, they go back and they fix a little bit. And when the spark plug's working, the spark goes through and your car will start. But since the Torah is the blueprint for creation, it's telling you what you're made of. You're going to want to give. You're going to want to retreat. And when it comes to the balance of that, that's going to be Jacob. Abraham called on God's name. He drew heavenly sources into the world. What did Isaac do? When we get to Isaac, he digs wells. He takes what's already inside a person and inside the earth and reveals it. So if someone says something to you and you go, I didn't know I had that ability, but that ability's inside you, right? So now it's coming right out from you. It's not someone saying, here's here's the keys and here's everything else. You need both. But you can't have just both. You need to have a third thing called Tiferes, which balances them out. So when reading, it's why it's important to read about Abraham and understanding him, and Isaac and Jacob and in the first book of the Torah, is because for the whole rest of the year we're going to be discussing these issues. You see, in New York law enforcement, they want to force on us certain issues about a concept of what giving is, what responsibility is. You have to understand the Torah way to understand what options you have. So Abraham sends away Isaac and Hagar, and an angel comes to them and says, go back and submit to Sarah. You will be a great nation too. And she raises him far away when he's older, when they go away, and he marries an Egyptian woman, and of course he is the father of many, 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 many nations. Then at the end of this chapter, we have one of the most extraordinary events in the Torah. Hashem says, it says in the Torah that when Isaac was born, when he was a child, Ishmael used to shoot arrows at him. And Sarah said, we got to get rid of this guy. He's not going to inherit with my son. They do. And then I'm going to jump into a story. A midrash says the angels are talking, and one says, look at this newborn baby Isaac. He would give himself for God, for no matter what. Abraham would do anything for God. And Satan, who's not called the devil, he's called the adversary, says, yeah, but would he give up his own son? And later we see that God says to Abraham, take your son and bring him up on the altar. Does anybody know the Bob Dylan song? God said to Abraham, kill me a son. He said, where do you want this killing done? He said, up on Highway 61. You find that most of our poets, and of course, we're familiar with their Bible. Leonard Cohen, especially, and Bob Dylan, somewhat. So Abraham's in a little bit of a bind. He's been praying his whole life for a son with Sarah. One day he gets up in the morning and God tells him, take your son and bring him to the mountain as an offering. Does he say, wait a minute, I'm going to start? No, he just brings him there. Now, if you know Abraham's character, which is built on giving and love and character, how can you even think that he's going to do this with his son? But Hashem says, Kach no es bincho, es yechidcho, es yitzhak. Take your only son, the one you love, because all of the other 9 tests that you've passed before, thrown in the oven of Nimrod, being chased, fighting the kings, having to send Ishmael away, there was something in it for you. This will prove that it's all about being Mesiras Nefesh for me, for God. So Abraham takes them, and if you read this, we read it every day. And Isaac says, where are we going? He says, I'm going up on to make a sacrifice. He says, I see the wood and the knife. He says, God will provide the sacrifice. Isaac understands what it is, and Abraham ties him to this altar. And Yitzhak says, yes, Father, if that's what God told you. Now, does anybody remember how old Isaac was at this time? Some people think he was a little boy. Jennifer, I'm not going to call on you because you know. But the picture is this little boy, right? Brian, did you happen to get a chance to read it this week? Well, anyway, it's the picture is Abraham taking this young kid. At this age, Isaac is 37 years old when his father takes him. 37. He knows what's going on. He's not 8 or 9. He's the first person circumcised at the age of 8 days. Abraham, as you remember, was circumcised at the age of 99. The custom, of course, is to have a bris on the 8th day. Now he says, take your only son, the one you prayed for so many years, the one you've been longing for, and bring him as a sacrifice. And God takes him. Abraham, just a picture of this scene. He ties him to the thing. He picks up the knife and he's got it up in the air. And the angel says, Abraham, Abraham, what are you doing? Stop. Now I see that you are God-fearing. And it says that he said, let me make at least a little nick on his neck to show Hashem I would have done it. And the angel says, no, 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 you can't. He's a pure offering because he's been taken. And then he sees a ram in the bushes, and he's exchanged. On Rosh Hashanah, we blow the ram's horn because of this, for one of the reasons. But what does the angel say to him in God's name? Now I see you are God-fearing. Well, originally we say that Abraham is love. Now we know that he is fear also, which means awe, the 2 wings of the spiritual bird that help it fly, because you can't be all one thing. We're mixtures of many different elements, and the ones that take preference at certain times will define who you are and how you are. He unties Isaac, and might as well tell the rest of the Midrashim. Sarah, at this time, found out what was going on, and she was distraught, and she thought her son was going to be killed. Later, she gets a message that he's alive, and she passes away at the age of 127 from the good news. It's an extraordinary story, no matter how you look at it. But what does it prove for Abraham was going to be the father of Av Hamon Goyim, the father of many nations? It means that he would so nullify himself to the will of heaven, to God, to do God's will. And because of that, he is worthy of everything that comes to him. Of course, his son lives because God never said, take him and sacrifice him. He said, bring him up. As Rashi's comment is, Abraham was saying, but you told me. He said, no. God said, no, I told you to bring him up. Now I'm telling you to bring him down. I never used the word to sacrifice. And what's the message for us? This couldn't have been a more opposite thing for Abraham than anything in the world. You can't say that there was anything in it for him. The message for us is that we are all going to be tested in life, and that life is a test. And usually, if you're lucky, though you may hate it, you will be tested with the thing that's the most unlikely for you, the thing that's against you. It's not going to be against the Torah, but it's going to be against your personality. It doesn't get any farther away than what happened to Abraham. But it is going to happen to us. In cases where we're one type of person, we're going to be demanded to face being a different kind of person because of the situation and see how we can incorporate that in life. It's an extraordinary story. And like everything else, it has to be extraordinary set out. Everything in the Torah is extraordinary. The building of the Golden Camp is extraordinary. Everything extraordinary. In fact, in this week, we have the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and Admah and Avoye. And it's an interesting thing. The angels are taking Lot and his wife out of the city, and they tell him, don't look back or you'll be destroyed. And Lot's wife, she looks back and she turns to stone. Harsh, very harsh. She's just human. But since the Torah is a blueprint, I heard a very beautiful explanation of this. People who keep turning around, looking back at the past as their way of living, are going to be frozen. The only way to live life is by moving forward. Sure, you think back once in a while, but if you spend your time thinking of the past and looking in the past, you're going to be frozen and not be able to change. And that's a kind of death. So now we have these incredible stories, and I'm presenting you with what your tradition says they mean. These are not interpretations from me. These are what I learned from my teachers and from famous sages. And these are the reasons that they are in these books to teach us, because if the Torah is not a book, it's a blueprint for life. It has to cover every particular situation. The most extreme situations it has to cover. So it ends with Abraham bringing Isaac, and then that situation works out because a ram is caught. And at the very end of that situation, it says that Milcah, who's the wife of Haran, gave birth to a bunch of sons. One of them is Besuel, and he gave birth to someone named Rivka. So this is Abraham's brother's family, and Rivka will eventually wind up being the wife of Yitzhak. So the whole thing on some level is extraordinary. It's, we don't want to have to face these troubles. Thank God we don't have to face these struggles every day. And yet every day we have certain choices to make. How am I going to behave? Am I going to behave like a mensch? Am I going to let my emotions get the best of me? Controlling one's emotions does not mean denying them or getting rid of them. It means trying to rechannel them if possible. If someone stops you on the street and tries to mug you, being a little bit angry and hitting back would be appropriate. But if a little child does something and you get real angry at a 2 or 3-year-old child, it might be out of place. So we meet together and we discuss these ideas. And then you'll say, well, none of this stuff is going to come up during my week. But I tell you, the Alter Rebbe said to his Hasidim, the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Hasidus Chabad, that we should live with the times. That means that each week's chapter of the Torah has something for you to live with. And each day we read one aliyah. If you notice in Shul, we have 7 aliyahs on Shabbos. That's for the 7 days. So today's the fourth day of the week. We would be reading the 4th aliyah. If you read one each day, you can finish the Torah portion every week in 7 days. And that day, there'll always be something that relates to you, not just spiritually, but psychologically, philosophically, culturally, because the Torah is all one. It's not something you do aside from your life. Kihem hayenu v'yorach yomenu. It is your life and your length of days. And the only way to feel that or to use it in any way is to actually do certain mitzvahs and do something in your life. Make something part of your life. There's no big or small. Light Shabbos candles, put a pushka up, do something light, learn some of the brachas. There's no too small. A little bit of light pushes away tons of darkness and also gives you the strength to do more. Because when you're stuck, you think you're stuck in one place and I can't just do the thing that I'm stuck at. No, you can't do all the things that are associated with what you're stuck at. And you don't even know what they are. That's why sometimes taking a small step in one area opens up a whole panoply of things that you just didn't understand you weren't doing because you had put a gate like in front of you. So Vayeira, God appears to Abraham. The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim explains the different words that mean have an appearance of, or what that means. Like when it says when God spoke to Moses, did he hear a voice? Did he, no, you can't. God has no appearance, but it does mean that the layers on you are so transparent that you can allow in something greater than yourself. You stay yourself, and yet you can transcend yourself. Transcending yourself in Judaism is not losing yourself. It's being yourself and reaching a higher level of reality at the same time. And may we be blessed to continue to do that, to make this home a dir b'tachtonim, a home for Hashem. And may we have a full shlem of Pesach ben Yom and Keli Yita, and Aaron ben Shimcha, and Shandel Pesach Brian, and everybody else who needs a full shlema. And the Jewish people should be safe, and New York City should be safe from this, whatever he is. And we should use this not to be victimized, but to strengthen all our efforts towards Judaism. You could volunteer help some Jewish organizations somewhere, because now is the time to do it. And we should have Actus Yisrael, love a fellow Jew, no matter where, no matter who. We should have a good Shabbos. and we'll see you next week. If anybody has any questions or anything we can help them with, please contact me or Lindy. She's around, but she couldn't make it today. And thank you for tuning into Creative Spirituality. This is Phillip Namanworth. Be well.
Every soul is a candle. Every soul is a candle of God, sent down